Well, hello, everybody. I want to welcome you out to our first Apex at the Peak show of the year. I have with me today Mr. Clay Elliott. Clay is a legend on the sheep side of things. Like I said in the post that I wrote about him, a lot of today's best genetics, best rams and ewes trace their heritage back to the Allred Elliott operation. He also works at Purina as a consult for the Purina small ruminant division. And I'm just super excited. Clay, I was just telling Clay that, he's been influential even for this small guy out in Utah with a ram that really just changed our program. So excited to have Clay out. How are you, Clay?
Oh, I'm doing good. I'm glad to be on, and I am excited to come and do the Apex. I know that this thing has been good in the past, and I know that it just continues to get better and better. And I was excited when you asked me if I would, in fact, come up there. So yes, I'm looking forward to that.
Well, I'm glad that people are saying it's a good thing to come to. So
Absolutely,
we're working hard on
I've
that.
tried to buy some weathers out of that thing in the past online, and so I know it's been good. So it's very good.
Yeah, the quality's been really good. I can't say enough about our consigners. They really have showed up with some really high quality stock the past couple of years. So it's been good. So let's kind of start with your background in livestock. Where does everything begin for Clay Elliott?
Well, I actually grew up on a ranch in Newcastle, Wyoming. We used to run we still run cows, probably close to 500 head of mother cows. And at the time, we probably had 60 to 70 head of quarter horse mares. My dad always had a few milk cows running around there. I showed lambs and steers and heifers and horses and pigs, and I never showed goats. weren't really a thing at that point in my showing career. We hadn't got into the meat goats yet, but that was really where it all began. I actually was on a collegiate livestock judging team at Casper, Wyoming. I went on to Colorado State University and was on a very competitive judging team at that point. From there, I went to Texas Tech University and received a master's and a PhD while, in fact, training collegiate livestock judging teams. And that's actually what I did for the first 21 years of my career is train competitive livestock judging teams. And so from that point, why I took a dive into Purina, and that's where I've been ever since, I guess, for almost 9 years now.
Okay. So started in Wyoming on a kind of sounds like a bit of a diversified operation, had a little bit of everything running there.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And the part of that I disliked the most was pounding T-posts and fixing barbed wire fence. And so I decided pretty young that I did not want to do this forever. That was the one real drawback to ranching, I thought. So I figured I'd go get an education and try to do something else. And so that's how it all panned out. So we did run a set of clubland producing ewes with John and Jean Allred there in Vernal, Utah for a number of years. And then I had a group of ewes here in Oklahoma as well. And at one time, we probably combined had roughly 700 head of Hampshire-based clubland ewes running between Vernal and Calumet, Oklahoma. So one time we were pretty big.
So the herd, it started in Utah then?
It did. Allred Elliott actually did start in Vernal, Utah at John and Jean's place. I had my brother and I had a set of ewes in Wyoming, and when I was at college at Colorado State, and he was there at home trying to make it work and trying to keep the bills paid and the creep feeders fed and all that kind of stuff. It became just a little overwhelming for him, and so at that point we decided we would split the flock, and I sent my group of ewes down to John and Jean's, and then he dispersed his, and that's how the Allred Elliott flock began.
Got it. So how did you meet the Allreds?
Well, at the top of the Rockies, many years ago, probably too many to even count at this point. But I met them there. They were looking for a ram, and believe it or not, they had maybe bought the Supreme Champion ram there the last couple of years, and didn't feel like they were gaining anything. They didn't feel like they were improving quality. And as you well know, in many of the Utah County fairs, they do the Danish system where it's blue, red, or white. And he couldn't get his children out of the white group. And so he asked me, he said he'd been buying some really nice cabinet spread ewes over the years there at the top of the Rockies. And he asked me, he said, if you see a buck lamb or a buck here that you think would help, would you let me know? And I said, well, I'd be glad to. And so anyway, I happened to find a McCune bred buck at that time. Alan McCune, he had a line bred Cabinus 212 bred sheep that he had brought. And I liked him. He ended up maybe second or third in his class. And I told John, if I were him and with that set of ewes, I'd buy that buck. And he did. He went and bought him. And he come back to the pens afterward and says, well, he said, I bought that buck, but he said he only cost $750. He said, are you sure he's any good? And I said, well, no, sir, I'm not sure he's any good, but he's the one I like the best. And we used him at that point. That's how we got acquainted. The next year I went and saw the lambs out of him. And I thought there were a handful of lambs that were extremely good out of that buck and those Cabinus ewes. And of course, they weren't all just spectacular like we would like to believe in a fairy tale, but there were a handful that were extremely good. And I said, that buck did a good job. There's a few of them ewe lambs that I think you need to retain, and let's work around those. And that buck didn't live long, maybe a couple of years, and we didn't get a lot of use out of him, but what he did do was pretty good. And so right about then, while I had been to their place, looked at their stuff, understood that they had a great facility, they were willing to work at it. And so that's kind of how it all began. So I had met them. I knew them. I knew their facilities long before we actually became partners.
Got it. So is this, where are you living at this time when this is all kind of getting going?
Yeah, I'm in college at Fort Collins at Colorado State University. Yep.
Got it.
I am there on the livestock judging team trying to get a degree in animal science behind me. And we started a partnership right then. So
that's a lot of work for.
Yeah, those folks were phenomenal. I will tell you that they're not better people in the whole world than the Allreds, and boy, they did it right. I will tell you that. They worked very hard at it. They were very committed, and so I couldn't ask for a better group of people to work with.
Okay, yeah, that's a lot of work for a college kid, to jump back and forth between school and managing a club lamb herd.
Yep. So, but we managed, and you know what? John and Gene worked really hard, and when they would, I would generally try to either fly up there or drive up there in the spring and take a look at the lambs. And sometimes it was with a trailer at weaning time when I could grab a group of them and bring them back to sell. Other times I might fly up early, and then they would meet me part way with a group of weaned lambs, or even sometimes they would bring them all the way to me. Whether I was in Colorado or in Texas Tech University, or even when I went to New Mexico State for a couple of years, why they would bring those sheep there, or we would meet part way. It was just that was a good relationship, I will tell you.
That's awesome, and that's one of the nicest things about the industry we're in. The people we meet and interact with, they really are the salt of the earth.
Absolutely. Yep.
So.
Yep. A lot of them have the very same background that I had, just growing up in it and found a passion for it. So you bet.
Yeah, exactly. So tell me a little bit about the history of the herd. We can kind of throw out names that, a lot of rams tie back to, one of which being Composure,
right.
Swamp Donkey. That's another one. Advantage. So there's a Trunk. That's a good ram you guys bought. That's a big name.
Right.
So let's talk about those guys and some of your favorites. So
well, I will tell you that we initially, John and Gene and I initially went out to Mike Hancock's when we were looking for our first buck to bring in outside of that 212 son. And we went out there and found an old buck we called Broker. And Broker was a 31 411 sheep. Those are names or slash tag numbers that should be synonymous in the Hampshire breed. As in my opinion, those are two of the legends, and both of them came actually from Cabness. Cabness was absolutely red hot. They had a group of line bred Hampshire-based sheep that were papered for the most part, and they just had a phenomenal set of sheep that had extra quality, extra look, and were at the time very sound, very high-headed, very elegant kind of sheep that potentially maybe didn't have enough muscle, but man, their skeletons were impeccable. And I tell you, we could probably use some more of that right now if we could find them. But that's what drew us to those. I liked those sheep. I liked the loin edges that they had put into those sheep. I liked the hard muscle shape and touch that those sheep had for that time. So that's kind of, we got Broker into the mix, and he was a big hipped, good looking one. I was always an advocate for sheep that were up in their chest and down in their flank. Even when I first started, even if I didn't even know that was right or wrong, that was what I advocated for. I liked that look, and I liked cattle that looked like that. I liked hogs that looked like that. I like goats now that look like that. It didn't matter. I liked that look of their underlying balance and their top line being straight. And I liked that the deepest part being where their muscle tied in into their hock, and then their flank, and then their chest, and those kinds of things. And I love that look. And that's really where Broker kind of came in. And I wouldn't say that just the first swing that one just hit it out of the park, but after a year or two, the females in that thing were pretty good. We did have some success, but really the next buck we brought in was Trademark, and he too was a 31 411 deal. And Trademark was the one that actually set us up to start winning some shows in Texas. Our first major win, I believe, was the reserve champion lamb at the Houston Livestock Show, and he was actually a Trademark sheep. And then that opened the door for us to start selling sheep to a lot of the at that time, the renowned feeders that could really do a heck of a job. And from that point, and we got lucky. We got tied into some really good feeders. And then we had a significant amount of success for about 13 or 14 years in the state of Texas, just because we had such a great set of feeders. We continued to upgrade those sheep and try to make them better. Structure was always important. The quality and look was always important. And I would pick out our customers, our good customers' lambs for them. And it wouldn't be because I had them all pinned up in a little pen so I could touch them all and handle them all. I left them all out in a big pen, and I would watch those things wander around out there for days. And I'd never lay a hand on them. And the ones that held themselves together every single time, and I could walk out there at whatever time of the day and look, and that one was the one that caught my eye, or those were the type that caught my eye. Well, those were the ones that my feeders got. And I will tell you that the Clem family in Texas was one of my really good feeders at the time, and they had bought several from me and had done a really good job. But anyway, Jordan was the youngest boy in that group or in that family, and I sent them a sheep that was little and skinny and ratty and just a little kind of a knothead. But he was also out of Trademark, and I sure thought he was pretty good. And Dad Mark, he said, "Well, Clay, if you're coming to Texas, why don't you just throw that sheep on that trailer?" I said, "Oh no, sir, he's way too thin." It's like, "Oh heck, if you're coming, just bring him. We might as well get started." And they finally convinced me, and I brought that sheep to him. And I kicked him out, and he looked like, as Mark tells me later, he looked like a dang little kitten that come out of the trailer. He was a little old ratty cat, he thought that. And he tells me later, he said, "Clay, I really thought that you might have hosed us a little on that deal," because he was a fairly expensive sheep. But he tells me all of this after they won the Fort Worth Stock Show with him. So anyway, they held their tongue until after they won a big ribbon with him. And so that was one of my fondest memories and one of the coolest stories, I think, because they just took him. they didn't like him. They took him, and they said, okay, that's the one he said. And man, I tell you, the Todd Taylor family was that way. The Allen Miller family was that way. They just took the ones I sent them, and those folks, Clem's went on and were grand at San Antone as well. Terica Taylor won San Antone. She won Austin. The Whitty family, they had a run and won several of them major stock shows in Texas. And so the vast majority of those folks never picked out their own sheep. They just, because they were so skinny and so raw when they come out of Utah, because you know how cold it could get up there in the winter time. And boy, it's just hard to get enough creek feed poured into those things to get them to gain and grow. And so anyway, that was kind of some of the neat stuff, but we had a lot of success. Trademark really started some of that. And then I went and found Composure, and I'll tell you the story on Composure. He was a Cabaness bred sheep. And man, I had seen that sheep early in the spring. I saw him again in April. I saw him again in June, and he caught my eye every time, and I didn't buy him. And finally, last time I was up there, Riley Cabaness said he was going to take that sheep to Sedalia, and that sheep was skinny still. Riley, you're not going to take that sheep to Sedalia. So that sheep's way too skinny. And I said, would you consider just selling him to me? And he did. He said, yeah, I'll sell him to you. He said, I want $5,000 for that buck. And $5,000 was fairly good money at that time, but it wasn't outrageous when Composure came around. And I bought him. We bought him. I and the All Reds bought him. And the first set of lambs out of him, I will tell you, I was sick at my stomach, because all of those lambs were off in their hip. They had such a round turn to their rump that I was so disappointed, and I didn't know how we were ever going to get our way out of this train wreck that we had got into. And believe it or not, about my feeders, they continued to come and buy them, and I sent them some of those Composure lambs because that was the best we had. And believe it or not, those Composure lambs, long about August, my feeders were calling me and saying, hey, these lambs are pretty good. These lambs look nice. We're going to get along good with these. And my ewe lambs, my replacement ewe lambs were starting to kind of turn around at that point too. And I was thinking those things were pretty special. They were a little later maturing. It took a little time to get some flesh on them. But that first set of those Composures of the Deutschman family won San Antone with one of them. And then Terica Taylor in the next year, she turned right back around and won with a Composure sheep at San Antone. And so those sheep were very successful. But more importantly, the maternal base of those Composure daughters was impeccable. And that's what I think most people may remember the most about Composure himself is, yeah, he sired some winners, but the daughters out of that deal were insanely good. He had the ability to protect you. You could make some serious mistakes on your bucks and which ones you wanted to breed with, and those females would kind of drag you through it. Whether you made a good choice or a bad choice, they could pull you through. And so that was the neat part about that old buck. And I think the ewe base that we had put together with that 31-411 on the bottom side of it, and then bringing some of that old Composure stuff back in there was pretty instrumental. So we played pretty hard on the Cabaness genetics because, the Hancock stuff was all based upon Cabaness as well. And that's where we really got our start. And then, we brought in some different bucks along the way to help as the trend was beginning to change and make them a little stouter and wanted a little more leg wool. Then we brought in the old Mayhem buck that you had mentioned earlier. And he was a sheep that actually we bought from Kent Langmeyer. And Donnie Bagalka and I bought that buck in partnership together. And I don't remember what we gave for him, but it wasn't a whole lot. And Donnie and I we liked him, but we were both just a little skeptical to turn the whole flock loose on him or give a whole lot of money. And we got him bought, and we both used him and found out that the maternal side of those things were pretty good as well. And yes, they did increase their leg wool and Hampshire character. But and then we brought Trunky in a little later from James Duffy to also make their bone work and their foot size bigger. And my wife, when the first set of those hit the ground, my wife said, "What are we doing? Why did we do this?" As we were pulling every lamb that we possibly had bred to that buck. We were pulling every one of them. Every ewe had trouble. Those lambs were so big skulled, their jaws were big, their feet were big, their ankles were big, their knees were big, and I will tell you that we had utter trouble trying to pull those things and get them out of there. And yeah, they helped us. We got some sheep that were pretty interesting out of those, but in some ways I almost wonder if that maybe didn't work against us, because I really didn't really like those sheep, didn't really believe in those sheep, even though I made a decision based upon our customer base and what was being done out in the show ring. And then it was shortly thereafter that the Dwarf gene hit. And boy, we could make them really thick and really big legged and really furry in one generation. And well, I will tell you that absolutely just, I couldn't swallow that. I absolutely couldn't believe we were doing this as an industry. I didn't understand it. They were so structurally incorrect. They were little. They had no growth and no performance. I didn't understand why we thought as an industry that this was the correct thing to do. Well, thank goodness we have kind of bred our way back out of that. We did find the genomics that will help us to work around that. And we're breeding around that. You know, some folks may still be using some of it in spots. And I know a lot of folks are using, you know, FDUs on FD bucks still, and they're still getting a quarter of those things that are dwarfs, but the other 3/4 are probably pretty nice sheep. If you can afford to throw them that quarter away, why, more power to you. I know that a lot of folks now are thinking that maybe an FF buck's pretty important. And I think that's where we're at currently in the industry is, you know, folks are still using some FDs, and if they have blood tested their ewes and they know exactly where they're at, if they got FFs or FDs or even DDs, why, they can sure work around that. And so it doesn't matter to me, I guess, in my opinion, where you choose to lay your priorities. I'm not the one that's breeding them. And if you can afford to throw some away, why, to get that great one, why, I totally understand that. I'm a big believer in trying to make that entire flock or those entire lamb crop as sellable as possible, and that's a big challenge. As you guys all know, that's a big challenge that are listening. But that should be the goal, in my opinion, is to merchandise all of them, not just the top 10%. You should be able to merchandise the top 95% for above market price. And that's my thought. Now, if you're in the commercial business, then you need to be utilizing bucks that can add value. Okay, how can we add value in terms of performance and weight per day of age and feed efficiency? All of those things become very relevant as well. And now we're talking something totally different besides the show ring. But all of that's important. And I think when we lose touch as an industry of what's important, then I think we start falling for things like the dwarfism, and we start falling for things like supersized bone and big feet and big ankles and big skull width and those kinds of things. And I had a young person tell me, I was listening to Reasons a while back at a collegiate contest, and had a young person tell me that they liked this female because she was much stouter skulled and deeper jawed. And for a guy like me who's had my arm in the backside of hundreds of those things, that is not something that I'm real excited to hear about when I know what's going to happen. So we have to keep some of this in check, in my opinion. And that's all. I guess I'm on a soapbox a little bit, Riker, but you know, those are things that I believe in, and I still have a very strong belief in the production side of this. And when we start playing in the show world and we get outside of that just a hair too far, why, Mother Nature tends to bring us back. She's smart enough to know we've got a problem.
Yeah. So that kind of brings a question to my mind, because I've heard it said on social media and in conversations that what we do in the show ring has nothing to do with what's going on the commercial side of stuff, right? And I've heard it compared to, hey, you know, sports cars are impractical, but they're a hell of a lot of fun, right? And that's what we're doing in the show ring. And I kind of wonder, right, because when this whole shindig probably got started, 150, however long county fairs have been happening, right?
Right.
It was to get together and kind of compete against each other for the best production animal at first, right?
Sure.
So what are we doing right? What are we doing? What could we maybe improve on in the show industry?
That when you sent me that question, I thought, man, that's going to be the toughest question that he asked me because I think that generally speaking, I think we're doing a great job of making sheep that are muscular. That is a fact in our business, in the show lamb business. I would say 99% of the lambs that walk into a show ring anywhere in America, 99% of those will have a prime leg score. So that means that they have the top of the line in terms of muscle from behind. Okay, now maybe we should redo this scoring system at some point. But the vast majority of the sheep, and this is what the industry tells us, the vast majority of them probably have enough muscle. So should that be the number one criteria that I think that we should be working on in the show ring? And to me, that's not true. I think that we have enough muscle. What I don't think we have enough of is structural integrity. I don't think we have enough balance and look. I don't think we probably have enough general performance. Now, if we're showing these lambs at 140 pounds when they're a year old, like we do in Texas and Oklahoma, it took them 12 months to get to 140 pounds. Now, granted, we're monitoring their feed intake and all of that. So, to make your point, these are NASCAR, right? We're driving NASCARs around here. We're not necessarily fiddling around with just the average, and I get that. But to some degree, I think that what we do should reflect on the entire industry. And to bridge that gap, we're never going to be selecting commercial ewes out in the pasture, Rambouillet cross ewes out in the sagebrush to have extra leg wool, because that's only going to cripple them. Those thorns are going to get tangled up. They're going to get sore. We're going to have problems in terms of, blood spots. We're going to just make them sore. So, that's not going to be relevant ever. So, I question the pigmentation thing. Some folks like them really white pigmented. I like them. Some folks think I don't like them. I like them. That's fine. I just think that long term, if we're going to keep that in mind, why we're going to see a lot more cancer problems with these light featured Hampshire pelted type sheep that are really white. So I worry a little bit about maybe if we're thinking long term and we're not just following a little fad and a little trend. And I think that's one of the issues that bothers me the most about the industry, is I think that we can jump on whatever train's running the fastest right now, and that's perfect. That's what we're going to do. And I don't think that's necessarily always right. So a little dose of humility and a little bit of the old production aspect probably will always serve you well.
Yeah. It's interesting because when I, as a young kid, was high schooler getting into really breeding sheep, right? I remember going to the crossroads in Reno, and every single ewe would have a letter next to her that would say ST or triplet, right?
Right.
Single twin or triplet. I haven't seen that at any of the club lamb sales I've been to recently. I don't know about you. I haven't seen it, right? It's not something
totally.
we keep track of anymore,
I totally agree with you. Totally, 100%. We don't, and that's something I think is very, very important too. If just from a productivity standpoint, we got to have, if those old gals can't have two, we're losing money, because it takes roughly $400 a year. I'm giving you a ballpark to feed one of those ewes for 1 year. That's not giving her any value added anything. That's just dumping some corn and some quality hay to her and maybe some mineral. $400, okay? In the general scheme of things, if that lamb just has to go to market, you lost the money on that single, okay?
Yeah.
If you have two, why maybe you break even if they just go to market. Now, If you're playing the odds and you say, okay, I'm gonna do this, and I'm gonna have a Houston champion here. I'm gonna raise a Houston champion, and that one single right there could do it. And you know what? You sell that one for 2,500 to 35, 4,000, whatever. Now 5,000, whatever. Why, shoot, you can mark that down and say, you know what? I made money. I made money on that one. But you know what? I don't think there's any real producer who will tell you that they pay their bills with those $5,000 or $10,000 ones. They pay their bills on those 750 to 1,500s because they sell a lot more of those. Okay.
Yeah.
So back to my point of, man, we need 90-something% of those things to be sellable because we need those bottom enders to bring 750 so that mom paid for herself. Okay. And then those top end ones, they're gravy. That's awesome. I mean, we all love those. We all love to sell those. But if you only sell one of those $5,000 ones a year, and the rest of those things are sale barn to $500 ones, and you're probably economically not. You maybe have a pretty good tax write-off, I guess is what I'm saying.
So, which some people I need, I guess, but I'm not in that ballpark.
Well, sure, absolutely.
So, okay, so tell me your thoughts here, because I've got a buddy of mine, and I think is him, but he recently kind of said, I think I'm done raising club lambs, and he got out. And part of what he said is he feels like even the AI is just kind of leading to some issues. Hey, what are your thoughts on maybe embryo programs and AI programs and what they're doing to our functionality of these sheep?
Yeah, I think that's wonderful. I think that's a great question, and I think that's spot on, because in all reality, if you start studying some of these females, and especially the ewe lambs that folks are keeping that they're real high on, some of those their vulvas are starting to turn up. They're getting pretty small, and you start to wonder from a natural perspective, could these reproduce? Could a buck service this female naturally and get lambs? And in some cases, that may not be true. And so we're getting a little bit like the swine industry, where we bred some of the reproductive efficiency out of them. And if you talk to those folks that are selling semen, some of those bucks collect well, some of those bucks don't freeze well, some don't collect at all, some collect and freeze spectacular. And then that semen gets to where they're supposed to go, and it's no good. And then there's the other group that's like, oh man, this stuff is phenomenal. It'll breed ewes, frozen, fresh, whatever. There's all aspects of it, but they're not all that top of the line, A+ kind of semen quality, and they don't all arrive there. And so if we're doing that, why are we in fact taking some of the reproductive efficiency out of our replacements that we will keep out of that? And I think probably to some degree, yes. I'm not for or against AI or ET. Hell, we did a lot of it ourselves when we were knee deep in it. I mean, I'm not against any of it, but when we all breed to the exact same buck, and I've taken a trip across the country here looking and visiting with some of our customers, when we all breed to the exact same buck, there is no variation within the industry anymore. Okay, if that buck is generally speaking going to make them flat-bodied and light-muscled, and the few of those are going to be Louisville or Houston or San Antonio or Kansas City champions, that's awesome. But the rest of those things aren't sellable. So I think we're propagating some problems that we maybe don't even know we are. And I think that we're not thinking maybe clear enough ahead of time and looking forward enough into the future to realize, maybe some genetic variation isn't a bad thing. Or maybe utilizing some of our own bucks that we've raised, or still going out and buying some bucks, is still very useful. And I hear people tell me now, well, I think we're going to keep this buck. He'll be an awfully good backup to our AI. And in some cases, not all, but in some cases, maybe that backup buck's better than the bucks they're AI into. Okay. And so in all reality, I wish that folks, and I know they don't, but I wish that folks had the time, would take the time to go and study what they're breeding to, what they want to breed to. Go see those animals in person, not just the picture of the one that won something big, because that one was in the minority. Okay, let's find the majority and see what those look like. And again, I'm not trying to talk poorly of the AI or ET or anything. I'm just saying, man, we don't maybe all need to jump on the same bandwagon. And then, man, the Titanic went down with everybody. There's no sense in us doing that again.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think having a nice buck in your arsenal is not a bad thing. And
no,
maybe the idea of having an AI buck is intriguing to some, but man, I tell you what, it's pretty nice to have a pretty good one laying around the barn too.
Oh yeah. So I am one of the AI techs here in the state of Utah. I run around breeding a lot of people's sheep, and I can't tell you how many times I've heard that from breeders where they're like, we got some really good ones out of the AI with you, but then we turned around and everything that got covered by the buck in our barn, and those were pretty high quality. We actually sold most of those at a higher average, and it's kind of funny how that works out,
Indeed.
So we go out there and we try to AI to get some marketing behind these sheep that we're trying to sell to the world, and it's funny how that works, the one that doesn't have a name.
Agree. Totally agree.
So let's kind of switch gears. Let's talk about your idea of what a great female looks like these days.
Yep. I tell you, it doesn't. A great female and a great wether doesn't change a whole lot in terms of the foundation. The fundamentals are the exact same, and it all begins with their structure, how they move, how they hold their skeletons together. I think how their neck is hinged and how it sets on the top of their body. I'm a big believer in watching these animals move, and I like to see them. I like to see those animals be able to pick their knees up, bend their knees, flip their feet when they're moving. I like them to be able to reach. I don't like them to be bound and impeded. I don't like them to stomp their legs in the ground when they're walking. I think some of the exercise techniques that we use today maybe don't help us structurally, And so I think that if we don't have them sound to begin with, I think we've got a lost cause. We're fighting the wrong battle. We got to get them sound to begin with. They got to remain level in their top lines. They got to be flexible. They need to be square on their corners as best that they can be. But some athleticism, some flexibility is first and foremost. I love animals that balance, regardless of species. I want those things to have quality, and I want them to look good. Whether it's a gilt or a heifer or a ewe lamb or whatever, I want those things to be eye-catching when they first come in. And the best way to be eye-catching to me is be alert and high-headed and be able to move. And if they can't do those things, they're probably not one that I'm going to remember very long. Okay, that doesn't mean they're not going to win. It's one that I'm probably not going to remember. It's all relative to what's in a class. But the ideal female is one that is feminine. She looks like a female. She is not wadded up with just endless muscle and all that terminal shape. In my opinion, that's what the sire is for. I like females to be sound and good looking and have female character. I like those gals to have some body in them. I like them to have some fleshing ability. I want their chests to be up and I want their flanks to be down. I love that look. I will tell you that. I've loved that since I was a kid. Didn't even know why I liked it, but I liked it. Okay. And so that is something I think is very unique, and maybe that is a goal that maybe the vast majority are trying to do, but we're not getting there probably fast enough because we keep that muscle component in mind. And I get it. The male side are terminal animals, and we do need muscle. But we talked about that earlier, that the vast majority of these animals have a prime leg score anyway. So how truly much muscle do they have to have? Do Do they all have to cut a 4.4 loin eye? That's awesome if they do. When you're killing lambs that weigh 175 or 80 pounds, and these show lambs, why heck, that should be customary. We should be able to cut a 4 point something loin eye. If these things are 135 or 40 pounds and they're 160 days old versus what we're showing at 365, why their loin eyes aren't going to be that big. All right.
Mm-hmm.
It's the maturity factor just doesn't work. But I want them to be sound and good looking. They need to look like females. If they've got a big old wadded up neck and it's coarse and their shoulders are big, those gals aren't maternal. They are the ones that, traditionally speaking, are going to walk away from that lamb when it hits, or those may in fact be the ones we have trouble getting bred. If we keep some maternal ability and some look and some female character in them, they'll be more reproductively efficient. And you know what? I talked about the shape and size of their vulvas, and I know that's the big talk about the hog folks now, or for many years. Man, I think it's very important in what we're doing now too. I think we're failing in some areas where our swine folks have already been there. We could probably learn something from them instead of going down the same track. Now, from the male side, and if that's where we're headed next, I'm taking a guess, but on the market land side or the male side, some degree of terminal value is still imperative. I mean, it's still a market show. It's a carcass show. But if that's the case, when we use a 115 pounder to win a show, and those things are 125 pounder at a show, when those things are 9 months old, why, I shake my head, because that takes all the production out of them. That's a no growing one. That one didn't do a good job, even though they're muscular, even though they have a prime plus leg score, even though they're 2500ths in back fat and their loin eye is 3.8. Okay, those things are awesome, right? But it took them too long to get to 125 pounds. We're going to go broke feeding those kind. So I just think some realism in terms of production agriculture is going to always be important. And if we forget that, we're going to get into a train wreck. So the males, I think, need to be just as sound and as good looking. And yeah, we do need to have a little more terminal value in them. And that's where the buck comes into play. I think that's where we should be buying bucks, to add the extra terminal value. And it's okay for ewes to have muscle. I just don't think we need to wad that muscle up on them and make it round and extreme by any stretch. Like years ago, we saw some of those Calipese sheep that were, people call them double muscled. They're just Calipese is what they were. They had extra shape, and fertility was not good in those. Their vulvas were tiny in those sheep. And then we found out later in life that the carcass, in terms of muscle quality and tenderness, was not good in those that were so heavily muscled either. So, there's a lot of things I think we should be thinking about when we start talking about ideals, right? Which ones are the best? Which ones are ideal? What's the ideal female, the ideal market lamb, etc.
Yeah,
They combine a lot of things, I guess, Riker.
Yeah, so that's interesting. So you said that those double muscled sheep weren't as good to eat. I've heard that about the dwarfs too, that they're not as tender,
sure.
and they're not as good to eat.
I'm sure that's right.
So that is pretty interesting, because when we first got going and we ate a couple of the lambs out of that Mayhem buck we bought from you, his lambs were heck of a lot tastier than the sheep that you got off the range in western Utah.
Sure.
So I always thought that we were actually ahead of the curve in the at least taste wise,
right,
on the commercial side of things. So
right, that's awesome. Yep.
But yeah, if the dwarfs are having that same thing that those double muscled sheep had, that would lead to some. Nobody wants to have a tough sheep that doesn't taste very good.
Nope, I agree.
All right. So let's talk about line breeding and out crosses. When do you need to do each of those?
Man, to me, that is a double-edged sword. Everybody has their own opinion there. I will tell you that from our perspective, we very much were into line breeding. We did follow those Cabinets bloodlines very tightly and very closely. And what we wanted was a more predictable set. As I spoke earlier, we wanted to be able to sell the vast majority of those lambs, not just have that one or two elite ones and the rest go to the sale barn. We wanted to be able to sell them all, because that's where we could actually make some money at this, was on that middle to bottom ground that we could sell, not the elite ones. I mean, we can all make one of those elite ones, in my opinion. Be able to sell 95% of your lamb crop at better than market price, that's a challenge. And that's where I think line breeding comes in. It helps you with your predictability. And I also think that if those ewes are good looking and they're line bred, man, they can save you from a bad mistake or two as you buy bucks or AI with. Because those females that are strong maternally, genetically similar, and still have some look and balance and some structural integrity, they can protect the issues that this brand new buck that you either bought or AI'd to, they can protect those problems and make those lambs still sellable until you can get to the next lamb crop and get them bred differently. So that's why I think line breeding is so important, because, and the female base, genetically, it's always 50-50. We learned this in high school biology, that the sire generates 50% of his, he passes 50% of his genes. The female passes 50% of her genes. And I will tell you that in my experience, even though I know science is correct, but if those females are good, if they're good, then that female is worth 60% of her genetics. And that buck is only worth 40, because they can cover up the mistake you just made, because they're better, they're line bred, they're good, and they can protect you. So I'm a huge believer in that maternal side as much as anything. And we all say, well, I mean, we want to breed to the greatest bucks ever. We have the opportunity to breed to the greatest bucks ever through AI, and that's fantastic. But man, you better study on those things a little bit before you just start dumping semen into your high quality female base. Make sure you're using the right AI buck that can potentially help you. And I think a lot of folks don't really understand where their problems are at. If they study their ewes, they really don't know where their problems are at, or how do I improve them. So which bucks, generally speaking, should I be using to help me be better? And man, that's hard. I'll just tell you, that's hard, because it's hard to ask for help. But once you get to that point, you can say, you know what, I need some help. I need somebody who I have some confidence in to just give me some advice. Look at my ewes and give me some advice, or look at my lamb crop and give me some advice. I think, man, that's powerful. When you're to the point there that you can do that, man, that's awesome. And I will tell you that right now, I mean, we're getting ready to go to our Oklahoma Youth Expo the middle of March. And I have called one of my dearest friends in from Texas to come up here and look at these lambs with me, to make sure that I'm seeing what I need to see and what I believe I'm seeing, and make sure I'm on the right track here when we're fine tuning at the end. And the reason for that is because I know that I'm in my own barn and I can get barn blind. Or the other thing that happens to me is I get very critical. I get very down on them. And I think, oh my gosh, this one's loin isn't good enough. This one's, leg hair isn't good enough. He doesn't have enough rack. He doesn't have enough bud. His pins aren't big. Whatever. Okay, I get down on them. And I get very critical and think, well, gosh, none of them are good enough. And if I can get somebody who I truly trust and I believe in to look through them with me, then I can develop, create a plan from this point forward. And so I think that my best advice is to get somebody who you trust to look through your stuff and help you make decisions. I don't think, no matter how good you are at this, or if this is what you do for a living, man, that's okay. Get somebody that you actually trust, that you can talk sheep with. Have them help you. It's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great point and a great tip for everyone that's out there trying to raise the good ones. So, all right. So this is a question I asked a bunch of my friends what they would ask you. And one of them came back and said, listen, I've got, 30, 40 head of sheep. Maybe I'm just getting started into it. How do I go about getting started? How do I pick out some good females? And what's the difference between running 40 head versus 400,
Yep. Having a small flock of those things, I think, is awesome because then you got 400 of them, you've got a full-time job on your hands and then some. Not that 40 head doesn't give you plenty to do, but you have 400 or 700 of those things, man, that's your full-time job. And you're now using a 9 to 5 as the extracurricular at that point. That's where you get some rest maybe because this big flock is tough. Those 40 head, that's a good number. To me, if you've already got 40 head of them, that's great. Breed those ewes. I would tell you, do not. The biggest mistake people make, don't breed each of those ewes to a different buck because you don't know which ewes at that point are doing you a good job or not, other than they're doing maternal things. They're milking well, they're taking care of their babies. But you don't know what those ewes can generate if you're breeding one buck to one ewe and you just got a hodgepodge of everything. And you might like this lamb out of this ewe. It may not be the ewe that even did anything. It might have been the buck that time. But so my point is, breed them all to the same buck. And then that way you could figure out which ewes are actually doing a good job. And then start culling. Cull those ones that aren't good mothers. Cull those ones that don't milk good enough. Get those out of the way. And don't mess with those. And if you're just starting out and you want to start, buying 10 head of ewes to get started, go buy them all from the same place with the same genetic line. Don't go buy them one at a time here, one at this sale, one at that sale. Save your money and go buy 10 of them. Start with 10 head that are genetically similar, and then use one buck on them, and then start culling from there the ewes that didn't do as good a job. And then you could start, once you got your ewes created and you got them better, continue to improve, continue to keep ewe lambs that are better than their mothers, and move their mothers out as they get older. Okay, now 3, 4, 5-year-old ewe, maybe those things are doing fine. When they get 6, you're going to start seeing problems with them. So I guess my thought for you is to get those things out of the way by the time they're 6 or 7, and have them replaced with a ewe lamb or 2 or 3 that have already come through there. And if you don't have a replacement ewe lamb and they've actually generated females out of that ewe, then why is she still there? I guess is my question. Because to me, the key is the female base, because they will always protect you. So.
Perfect. So you guys, you still got one daughter showing, correct?
We do, yes.
Okay, so you make the trip looking for good weathers every year. What do you look for in these young green, 45, 60-day-old lambs?
Yeah.
We'll have a lot of people at the Apex who are looking at lambs that are 60 days old,
Yep.
And they're going to be green and they're going to look like it because they're slick sheared too. So,
absolutely. And I tell you what, I love that. I love it when they're skinny. If they're fat and obese as babies, it turns me off, and I'll tell you why. Because I can never make those animals look youthful and immature again if they are obnoxiously fat as babies. So I will tell you that having some greenness in this guy's opinion is a positive thing. Having those baby lambs obesely fat when they're 60, 70, 80 days, I think you've short-circuited their life in terms of a show lamb. I think you have to show those things early in life, and they're not going to make the long haul to March for the Texas and Oklahoma and Louisiana folks. So that's my thought. When I first walk into a pen, I don't ever, if they have them pinned up in a creep pen for me, I am at a loss because I will never find the best one. If they've got them out running loose in a bigger pen where I can watch them move, then I'm in heaven at that point, because then I can find them. I can find the ones that move good, that have their heads up. I like them to be cocky and alert, arrogant, if you will. I like to watch them move. I don't like their knees to be bent forward in them. I don't like their hocks to be straight. I like them to be able to flex and move and nearly cover their track if they can when they're moving. I like athleticism and flexibility. And notice I haven't talked about muscle once in that deal. I need them to be right skeletally and sound and good looking. And then I need their pins to be big enough. I need them to have some base width, both coming and going. And then when they're little and skinny, man, I spend a lot of time checking out those animals' forearms. That's the truest indicator, in my opinion, whether those animals are actually truly going to have some muscle in them someday or they're not, regardless if they're fat or skinny. And then, man, that rack shape tells you a bunch. Even when they're little bitty, that rack will tell you if they've got some chance to have some muscle in them. Even if they're skinny, you can reach in there and you can feel that loin eye. You can feel that crease from their spine where that loin muscle is, and you can definitely tell whether that sheep's going to have a big rack or not, even if he is bone thin. So I think there's some fundamental things in terms of skeleton and just touching those things in the right spots and studying the right views to actually know whether you got a chance to get muscular enough. But skeleton and look are my first cut.
Perfect. That's super helpful, and I think we get a lot of first timers at the Apex. They're hunting, and it's good to have a guide like that, And one thing I just want to add to that is, hey, if you need some help looking at these things, one, go to a place like the Apex, right, where we've already got somebody who's experienced, who's done this a while,
Sure.
sorting through these things for you and helping you with just the sell order,
Yeah.
And then two, ask a lot of questions.
Absolutely.
Because finding those good ones, it takes some training. Your eyes take some time to kind of figure out what you're looking for, and you might as well use the experience to get where you're going.
Absolutely.
So, all right, let's see here. I want to see what I've got next on my list. Let's talk about Purina a little bit and what your role is there.
Okay. My title is a small ruminant technical consultant. And so I basically run around America and work for the small ruminant business. I am the PhD technical lead in that. And so research and development, a lot of the products that you see that are coming out through Purina are probably products that I have, at least with my brainchild. And then I've asked some of our other nutritionists to help me to create what I'm after. And we have an awesome team. I want to add that up front because I work with some people that are absolutely intelligent and are extremely good at what they do. That are close, that I work closely with, and those folks are, man, they get it. I mean, they understand. If I tell them what we're after, they go to work trying to figure out what ingredients, what new ingredients, or how do we incorporate this, and phenomenal. And so that's what the new products you see, those are generally stuff that I had thought of, and it all kind of comes back to issues that I have, that I've seen, that I've dealt with. I mean, the Wind and Rain sheep mineral was a mineral that was designed for our place because, man, we had a calcium issue one time where several of those ewes went down, and then they developed ketosis from that point because those babies are growing so fast in that third trimester. And so, man, we developed some stuff that could help us, Lily and I, to be able to break through some issues. And then those high fat tubs that you folks see, I mean, those were something that we use a bunch because it's easy. It has an intake modifier in it that we can just turn them out and on forage, and those ewes will stay in good body condition, or those does will stay in good condition. We don't have to feed them every day and let them run over us and all that kind of stuff. I mean, just some innovative things like that. And we've got a new product out that's called Rest Easy. That's a cough suppressant, an all natural cough suppressant. Works wonders. I mean, absolutely works wonders. And those folks that have show lambs, you know that you're going to end up with some barn cough at some point. And that's a product we just top dress with. It's awesome like that. So that's what I do. I spend a lot of time doing meetings and do producer talks and talking about products and where they fit and how to help you. That's the bottom line. I think that's my job, is because I've been down the road. I haven't been down every road, but I've been down a lot of them. Now I'm 52 years old this year, and I've been around sheep since I was probably 8, maybe even before that, because we had some ewes around the house before that. So basically all my life, okay? And I've seen things that probably most people shouldn't see in this deal, but I've also seen good things too. I've seen the bad, I've seen the good, and I haven't seen it all. I'm not telling you I have, but I've seen a lot of it, and I can hopefully use some of these products that I developed that will help us so that you don't have to deal with as much of it. And that's kind of the idea. That's kind of what I do. I do a lot of troubleshooting. I talk to a lot of producers when they've got problems. So I do a lot of that. I don't know. I'm part vet, part nutritionist, part management, part, I don't know. You name it, I've probably been part of it. And so anyway, but I do try to help. I want to help our people and our customers in particular. So.
Yeah, we're excited to have you do a little presentation at the Apex too, to provide some more education on what Purina can do, helping breeders and showmen with their projects.
Gotcha.
So
that'll be great. Well, I sure look forward to coming out there, and I'm anxious to get to sort the stock and visit with the people.
Yeah, I appreciate that. So last thing, and then we're gonna call it an evening. This hour's flown by. I can't believe it's already been an hour. Learned a lot. So my last question for you, you see this a lot on social media, is that, kids feel like, and parents are starting to feel that you have to spend a lot of money to do well in the show ring.
Right.
What are your thoughts on that, and how a kid can go about, doing good without spending an arm and a leg to get this?
Well, I think that's as good a question as maybe you've asked tonight, and we have never been able to buy the big budget sheep. My family, we've never done that. We have sold a few that have brought good money, but we have never bought the big budget show wethers for my kids. We have bought high quality ones, but we have always bought skinny ones that probably have a problem or two that kept them from being that expensive one. And we just accept the fact that we're going to have to work a little harder than those folks who bought the really good one. We're going to have to spend more time in the barn feeding and exercising and trying to make our lower cost sheep just as successful. And I'm not saying that we win the world, but we're generally competitive, and we do it with lower cost type sheep, generally speaking. I will tell you that our reserve grand lamb at OYE last year was a $3,000 wether. Now, some folks say, oh my gosh, that's expensive. Yeah, that's plenty of money. But I will tell you that it's a far cry from what those things at the top of the market bring. The 3,000 is more general now, average, than it is the top of the market. And so we feed a lot of $1,000 to $3,000 wethers, and a lot more of those $1,000 to $1,500 ones than the $3,000 kind. I will tell you that. So the reason why we don't spend that much money, number one, we're probably going to lose money in this project anyway, regardless of what you spend. But we are raising our kids, and I believe in that. And I wouldn't want to raise my 3 daughters in any other system that there is. This is what we do. This is our basketball team. This is our softball team, our football team, whatever. This is what we do for our sport. We don't go to the lake. We don't go fishing. We go to the barn. And so that's what we do. We spend a lot of time out there, and that's really kind of our saving grace. That's where we go to unwind. That's where we go to be funny. That's where we go to tease each other. There's a lot more that goes on out there besides washing legs and practicing showing. And all of those are important, believe me. If you don't have them head walking good for the show ring, you're beat before you ever start. If you don't have them broke to show, you're beat before you start, okay? But those are all things that we control. We control that. Nobody else does. Our pocketbook doesn't control that. That just is determined by how much heart and desire. So I would tell you, don't ever give up. Go buy the sheep that are skinny and good looking, that have a chance to get better, that have good lineage behind them. Buy them from breeders that you trust and listen to them. Let them help you. And then spend some time in that barn. I mean, once you get them in your barn, that your project has begun. Start working. Don't let anybody ever outwork you.
Perfect. I love that answer. Well, Clay, thanks for joining us tonight. Just a couple of quick announcements as we send everybody off. We are going to do some future live streaming sessions. We will be bringing in the champions from each division from last year and talking with them about their animals. So letting everybody know that's watching that there are going to be more of these. We're going to be bringing everybody back as we get them scheduled. So another thing, go to the apexshow.com. There's lots of information on there about the show itself, the schedule, and entries are due March 20th for the Apex. And entry forms are live right now. You can go on and start submitting those entries for the Apex. This has been At the Peak, and we're excited to see you guys all at the Apex April 7th and 8th in Logan, Utah at our new location. The facilities are way better this year than we've had the past 2 years. So, guys, come on out, enjoy Logan, Utah. It's a beautiful place in the United States, one of the prettier places that I've ever been to. And we've got great facilities. And even if it's cold here, we've got climate control in both the barns that we're going to be operating out of. So it's going to be nice no matter what. So, guys, appreciate it. Appreciate it, Clay. And look forward to the future At the Peaks we're going to do, and look forward to having you at the Apex. So
sounds great. Thanks so much.
Thank you.